Zettelmoyer,
Yes, sir.
what's going on?
I am letting my friend know that was just trying to call me recording. Much is going on. It's been a really productive week.
Good. What's up? Me too, but what's up with you?
Well, let's see. I just finished my fourth. So I work out with Steve Tuesdays and Thursdays. So this is my second week. And note to self, do not work out with Steve just before recording this because all I want is a nap. So Tuesdays and Thursdays may not be a good day going forward. But who knew? But he's wearing me out and I've had results already, and he's awesome and gracious and motivates and pushes me, and I just feel so good about it. And it's just, I'm blessed to have him because I'm the only person outside of that world that he's taken on ever. And I don't know what I did to deserve it, but thank you, God, for bringing him into my life. Work has been very productive and awesome, and I get to do this with you. So, I mean, I, I'm, I'm living a good life.
Catherine says hello.
That's right. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah. I've been. I had it. My business is like this quite frequently, which is the uh, the clients come in bunches, and there's predominantly because of where I live, it's cyclical.
Well, you've got your high school stuff that's going to come around at the same time. You're going to have proms. You're going to have weddings.
I don't do any of
spring and
that
June.
bullshit. Proms, no. I used to
Oh, you
do
don't?
that. No.
Oh, well,
No,
football
no.
games you do, right?
Not anymore.
Oh, really?
No, I got none of that stuff. It's all, there's a business equation. It's cost benefit. It's a cost benefit analysis. And what was that stuff costing me versus the benefit that I was getting from it? And there's this thing in the business that if you are spending 80% of your time on a client base that gives you 20% of your income, you need to do something about that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so that means conversely that 20% is bringing in the other 20%, but they're bringing in, that small percentage is bringing in a huge percent, or actually, I'm sorry, bringing in 80%. So that small client base is bringing in the vast bulk of your income. And so at some point, no, I cut all that. So all the stuff, not only because there's too much expense in time and resources involved in doing all the team photography and the athletic stuff. And especially when I was working for the media as well. And so I'm driving all over the state, following football and basketball games and soccer and this, that, and the other. And it just doesn't pay enough for what I'm putting out. And I was ending up having to neglect growing the other part of my client base, which is weddings and high school seniors, senior pictures, not sitting there, like we did in the little, in the drape or in the fake tux front, but I mean, an actual senior photo session,
right?
A lifestyle session, and a lot of families I do. But anyway, so, because it's 1 billion degrees between basically late May and early October here, you don't do a lot of weddings because it's a destination wedding site. So everybody wants to come here and get married outside.
Right.
And I mean, there's actually a surprising number of intrepid souls who do come here in the summer and get married. And because of COVID, we had a big surge in that because everybody lost their spring. So we had a bunch of people getting married in the most hellish conditions possible. But anyway, so why was I talking about this? Business comes in spurts and in cycles. So last week I had 3 days in a row. I went out to I guess I guess you could call it a private island. It's an uninhabited island off the coast, basically off of Beaufort. If you know where all that stuff is, Beaufort and Port Royal, it's right there, kind of where Paris Island is and all that. But there's an island out there called St. Philip's Island that used to be owned by our buddy Ted Turner. And yeah, he built a home out there it was just a getaway. You have to take a boat there. If you take a really fast boat, it'll take you about 30 minutes. If you take your average boat, it'll take you
out there
an hour. Yeah, it is way, way out there. And so he sold it back to the state of South Carolina recently, and his home is included. So the state is using the home as part of the state park system, and they do tours, and they rent the house out for guest stays. Like you can pay some crazy ass amount of money and go stay out on your own private island with your own chef. So everything's out there, because you can't, you got to bring everything with you. So you have your own chef and all this kind of stuff out there. It's like $20,000 for a week or something. But the house,
you taking Meredith?
Yeah, you could probably fit 3 full families in there. So when you think about it, if you do a big trip like that. Anyway, so we went out there and I did a bunch of photography of the home and the island for the state of South Carolina. And then the next day I had a family session, which is a family that we had last year, and they've added a new baby. So we did them. And then the very next day I had a high school senior on the senior experience. So it was 3 wildly different work situations. And it's why I'm the best of the best. It's why I do what I do and why people come to me. But on to the business at hand. I got a thing that's been scratching at my brain for a while. That's every time I interact with, I guess, humanity at large, whether it's I go out I go out to the store, so I'm in my car, or I'm walking through the parking lot, or I'm going in a store, or I'm at the bank, or whatever in the world it is. There's always been idiots, and there's always been assholes, and there always will be. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just that now it seems like something's off. And so I started noodling this out, and I scratched down a few things. So I'm going to read something and then kind of get into a few examples of what I'm talking about. And so I've been struggling for a very long time with the crumbling infrastructure of humanity, most especially where the degeneration manifests within our connection to the people and events around us. And that's important. Where it manifests within our connection to the people and events around us, because no one thinks about that anymore. And the dysfunction isn't limited to a particular demographic. You can't say, oh, it's just these asshole teenagers. They're all cranky and that, they don't get enough sleep and they're hormonal and blah, blah, but they'll get there. They'll be okay as long as we, keep the support and keep the guardrails up. Except it's not that. It's not that anymore. That's a given. That's a given. What's not a given is this cross-generational nonsense. So this dysfunction isn't limited to a particular demographic. Our about face from common decency spans all generations, subcultures, and human ecosystems. And there's little ecosystems everywhere. From the inside, there's probably more than one ecosystem inside your own house. And it just goes from there. Now, the catalyst of this general degree of assholery is pretty starkly clear if you bother to engage your brain for a half a second. And that's the other thing that people don't want to do anymore, because it's not that they don't want to, they don't have to. And so they don't have to make that choice. They got instant distraction anywhere they want it. So everything in our lives is counterfeit data designed to distract us from reality. Empty calories, decaying your perspicacity. Okay, that's for those of you who need the human thesaurus. That's keenness of perception, understanding, and insight. So
Thank you.
yes, it's empty calories, decaying your perspicacity, ulcerating your physical constitution, and festering diabetes of the spirit. And that's three things. That's your mind, your body, and your spirit. It's tearing it apart. It's the causation of our belief that Group X is evil and the absolute refusal to reconcile our brains with reality when we encounter Group X out in the world, and they are decidedly not evil. It's the reason we Photoshop rainbows onto an otherwise beautiful photo. I came across that today and I thought my head was going to explode. I've told you, and I've told all of y'all, I have Instagram and Facebook because I have a business and my business is photography and I have to have it. That is the only reason I have it. So because it's there when I post things of my clients, because they want to see their beautiful pictures and share them and all that kind of good stuff. Well, because I have to be there, there are exactly three things that I allow into my Instagram feed or my Facebook thing. And that is pictures of border collies, pictures of Scotland, and something else that you and I won't get into right now because it's a touchy subject. Anyway, so I don't have any friction that comes in through my little social media world. So I'm looking at pictures of Scotland and it's beautiful. You know how I feel about that place. I'm tied to there. My soul belongs there. It's beautiful. It's lush. It's greenery. It's hills. It's the coast. It's, everything from Edinburgh to the big city of Glasgow with all of its history and all of its stuff, on up to the Isle of Skye and on up to Inverness and on way up into the islands and Shetland and all that. And it's just so gorgeous. You don't need to do anything to photos of Scotland if you're a halfway competent photographer. And so I flip and I see a picture of Urquhart Castle, which I've been to, and it sits on Loch Ness. It's just down the road from the town of Inverness. And it's a stunningly beautiful thing. And there's like 3,000 castles or something like that. No one write to me and tell me how wrong I am about that number. There's thousands of castles all over Scotland, and they're all ancient.
And all owned by Nicolas Cage.
And I don't know about that, but
he bought up a whole bunch.
As long as he has good motives. But anyway, so there's a museum and a visitor center back there, way back from the castle, and it sits up kind of on a separate hill that overlooks down to the castle in Loch Ness. And it's just a beautiful scene. And I know, because of what I do, I know fake Photoshop bullshit when I see it. And I'm looking at this picture of this castle, and here comes this huge rainbow right across. And all you have to do is look just at a couple of things and just technical things. It's like, why did you Photoshop a fucking rainbow over a goddamn castle, one of the most iconic places on earth? This is why we do that. This is why we do that. The subject of this is why we do that. So let me get back to what I was talking about, because I knew I was going to get off on that tangent. But it is also the basis of phony agitation and serenity. Both of them. You got to be reminded to be, what are we now? Offended. You got to be reminded to be outraged. And unfortunately, most of the time, you got to be reminded to calm down and be peaceful. And you're not going to get either of those with all this distraction. So it's phony agitation of phony serenity. And quite honestly, it is a giant case of global cognitive dissonance. And what that means is that it's a psychological disorder in which a person can hold two diametrically opposing ideas in their head at the same time and basically not have a problem with that. They can reconcile both of them in their head. That's cognitive dissonance. And that's what this mass case of cognitive dissonance. And it is complete and voluntary disconnection from reality and the real functioning universe surrounding you. Disconnection. The problem is that we have no connection anymore to anything that's real. It is insane what we have done to ourselves with, I don't even know where mine is. With the little phone and with social media and all this stupid bullshit. It is insane what we have done to ourselves. The ubiquitous phone and heroin needle of social media have created a whirling vortex of disenchantment comprised of these things: entitlement, anonymity, ignorance, and a complete lack of self-awareness, all leading to disconnection. And if you were going to concoct a recipe for the disintegration of a society, that recipe would be on the Food Network of evil. Because you look around, and that's basically what you're dealing with: entitlement, anonymity, ignorance, and a complete lack of self-awareness. Because everything is boiled to whatever little screen you're looking at. And the entitlement of, you don't even need to explain, you don't need to go any farther to explain how entitled we are as a society. We're in that cycle of the generations where we cycle back around to where it was built, where it was held, and where it was pissed away. And we're cycled back around to this entitlement thing, because regardless of what you can tell me about little tiny individual stories, as on the micro level, on the macro level, as a nation of, I don't know, nobody can even guess anymore, 300-ish million people, we don't have an awful lot of core struggles that are hurting us as a society. And I'm not talking about this nonsense that's going on right now out in the streets. I'm talking about things that really matter to people: feeding your family, keeping a roof over your head, all that kind of stuff. Everybody's told, see, that's part of this. Everybody's told day after day that none of those things exist. That unless you're a privileged group X whatever, which is ironic because it's always the privileged group X whatever that's telling everybody these things. But you're told that unless you're in that privileged group, that there is no housing for you. There is no health care for you. There is no food for you. Everyone's apparently naked, starving, and dying in the streets right now. Although I can't walk out and find any of that anywhere. And again, I'm talking about on a macro level. I'm not talking about individual cases of struggle. So we're not struggling as a culture, and that leads to entitlement. Anonymity, think about this. Social media gives a sense of anonymity because you don't have to stand behind, you can say whatever you want, you don't have to stand behind it. What I mean by that is your little avatar or your little online personality can stand behind it if it chooses, or it can run away or delete or, do whatever. So that gives you a sense of anonymity. And think about it this way. It's kind of like taking what they've done to my hometown. Taking a small town, the population of my hometown was less than 1,000 20 years ago, and now it's about 35,000. Well, the place hasn't grown. They just keep stacking people on top of each other. And also all the places around us, Savannah, Beaufort, Hilton Head, all of Hardyville, Ridgeland, all those places have grown as well, but all of the business is here. So not only have we increased our population by like 30 times, all the other increases in population are driving here to work too. You're stacking people on top of each other. My neighborhood, when we first built our house in our old neighborhood 4.5 years ago, there was like 70 homes in the neighborhood. Now there's 1,000 homes in that neighborhood. Can you imagine? Now, and think about it, like relate it to a small town. A small town, there's no anonymity in a small town. Everybody knows what everybody's doing. And there's jokes and memes and all that kind of stuff about that, but it is what it is. So it serves a very good purpose. because you're extraordinarily less likely to burn down the Walgreens or Gert and Sam's Five and Dime in a town of 1,000 or less than you are in a town of 1,000,000 or whatever. Because in that big city, you have anonymity, and you might not even be another face in the crowd. You're just a shadow somewhere. You're a non-entity. And so that's the same kind of world that social media creates, just this anonymity. And so your behavior crashes when you feel anonymous. You're not held to a certain standard. If you act like a fool when you're 15 years old in a teeny little town, everybody's going to know about it. And not only are your parents going to find out, that's the least of it. You're going to start building this reputation, and everybody's going to know about it if you act like a fool. If you live in a big place, or if you exist in the social media world, if that's your neighborhood, the social media world, which it is for so many people these days, you're going to have a lot more license to act like a fool.
Well, you're also somewhat encouraged.
Oh, totally. And that's the group mentality. And that's the
mentality. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's the anonymity factor also, because you can fly under the radar doing that. And again, nobody wants to be misery loves company. Nobody wants to be miserable alone. Also, no one wants to be an asshole alone. There's always an instigator, but the instigator doesn't want to go do it out by himself. But and ignorance, this self-imposed ignorance. Again, I say it 1,000,000 times till blue in the face. There's nothing new under the sun. We've always had dumb people. We've always had ignorance, and even smart ignorance. Ignorance and intelligence are not necessarily correlated.
That's exactly correct.
And quite often the opposite is true. So we've always had ignorance, but now, because it's so easy to either not bother knowing anything or to just take what you're being algorithmed to death here, you're being fed a thing. The news is exploding right now because, of course, Facebook, and the other one that starts with a T are censoring legitimate media sources because there's a story coming out that, and we're not doing political here, but there's a story coming out that is huge, but it hurts their narrative. And it's not even a news story.
Allow me to add to that. I heard this morning on good old talk radio that social media is now the #1 source for people to go and find their news.
Yeah, totally.
If it's being censored, and it's bullshit most of the time anyway in opinionated columns, and now that's where everybody's going, no wonder we're ignorant.
Yeah, and it's been that way. That's not brand new. That statistic is probably 2 or 3 years old. The #1 news source. There's no such thing as news anymore anyway.
No, there's not. There's not real journalism anyway.
When everything open source is available 24/7 at all times, there's no such thing as news anyway. So the concept of news as you and I knew it growing up, that's just not even a thing anymore.
That's right.
Now it's just whatever information you're being fed. And
for 24 hours, as you said. So they're having to repeat the same things, and they're having to make it exciting or exaggerated for you to watch it.
Yeah, when you put it in somebody's hand, though, and when you put it in somebody's hand and take away the need to make an effort to go sit in front of the television and spend half an hour watching the news, when you put it right in somebody's pocket, right in their hand, which they're just freaking glued to the whole time, their entire lives anyway, then you have control. And that is ignorance. That's where ignorance comes from. So you may know some things, but you know some things that you're supposed to know because you're being fed information on whatever narrative, whatever person wants you to know. So you're ignorant of everything. And again, that goes back to the whole cognitive dissonance thing. You can walk out in the street, all these people who are calling everybody an ist, all kind of isms. They walk out in their neighborhood and they don't see that. And they proceed with their day as if they always would. But then they go back on their little their little handheld idiot box full of mental sawdust, and the world tells them a whole different thing. That's the cognitive dissonance. So past ignorance and onto that is a total, complete lack of self-awareness. And not only do people not have any spatial awareness of where they are in the world, because you look at your average person. I've started a game in public. If I'm in places like, well, we're not going to give out big store names. If I'm in the store and I see two parents or one parent, I see a family, and I'm thinking of an example that happened to me in a big giant home improvement store about 3 weeks ago. There was a mom and a dad and a son and a daughter, and the son was probably 15 or 16, and the daughter was probably 9 or 10. And the daughter wasn't 2. She was 9 or 10, maybe 11. And she was riding in the cart, staring at a tablet. And she was probably 30 pounds overweight, because that's all she's ever done. She's riding in a cart, staring at a tablet, completely turning her brain into mush. And we're going to get on another episode, not in the not too distant future, we're going to get into the physiological destruction of a child's mind and body that these electronic devices do. So she's doing that. The dad is pushing the cart. The mom is doing the same thing with the phone. And the son, I watched him, and he must have amazing peripheral vision, because the kid never, ever, like for minutes at a time, never looked up from the phone while he was walking around. And, this little motion right here, that's all they do. And that's the thing that kills me about this. They're not even looking at anything. How you can't see anything? You're scrolling too fast. But anyway, so I was in an aisle, and here they come round the corner. Actually, the parents and the daughter went straight, and the boy wasn't paying any attention. So he turned on, they went down to the next aisle, and he turned on my aisle, and I just stood there, just waiting for him to walk into me. And he did. Just completely unaware, a complete lack of spatial awareness or self-awareness in how you relate to the world around you. And it's dangerous. It's not, I say all these little things like, do whatever you need to do in your life today. If it's only one thing, do a little thing, whether it's picking up a piece of trash, and tomorrow do it twice. And the day after that, do it until it becomes simple, right? Self-engendering machine of perpetual effectiveness and result. That applies to all of these little things, because I've said this on an episode a while back, is that you may roll your eyes when I talk about how much of an asshole you are because you leave your shopping cart in the parking space, or because, whatever the little thing is, whatever, you never go on time at red lights, and all these little things that when you hear them individually, you're just like, dude, you need to chill. Except for this. When I say them all in a row, it's overwhelming. And you now have a society built on this, and that is that a million little things ignored turn into one giant mess. And we have a giant mess on our hands right now.